Hello there. It's SaSeshen. Welcome to the stream. We apparently got a follower right before the stream started, so let's give a shout out to Dissector. I appreciate that. Thank you. So in today's stream, as you can see up there, we are going to discuss the jobs report. The fun fact is that it is doing a lot worse this time around than we thought it was going to do. And of course, if you just look around you, if you look at your groceries, the cost of gas, goods, your rent going up, your wages stagnating, of course, the jobs report is going to be worse than what has been alluded to in the news and by the administration. So that's one of the things we're going to cover. We are also going to kick it off with, unfortunately, addressing Donald Trump and his latest insanity, literally threatening revenge against his political enemies. So we're going to dissect that a little bit, and then we're going to get into the jobs report. There are a few different takes. For one, there's the JOLTS report, show drop in job openings. And then there's the views of the nation's economy, and of course, the state of the American middle class. We might get into a fun little React Hour video, The Dark Truth of Sheen, TikTok's toxic obsession. But we might also talk about other things too, depending on where the stream takes us. Also, we might end up getting into gaming. We did not yesterday. No, we were very much so hook, line, and sinker into the Biden administration's executive order, making it more difficult for migrants to seek asylum, and of course the Republican tirades that followed. I just realized my mic right where it needs to be. Perfect. So now, luckily that was just the introduction. So now we should be able to get underway. So without further ado, we'll just take a looky here with Trump, unfortunately.
All right, well, yesterday we had the opportunity to sit down with former President Donald Trump for an hour and a half. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about policy. We talked about his approach to Ukraine, debt, deficit, but obviously the top of everyone's mind, how do you feel about what happened in New York City? And what will be your response should you be elected, and how would you use the Department of Justice? Here is some of Donald Trump responding to the court case in New York.
In your presidency, what they've done to you, you've got the verdict that just came through. A lot of Democrats have expressed concern that if you're elected, you're going to want revenge. And some of your supporters have said, well, mutually, we're just talking about the weaponization of the justice system against political opponents. Some of your supporters have said, well, the only way to stop this is mutually assured destruction, right? If you do it to us, we're going to do it to you. You've said, no, my revenge is going to be success for America. You've just had this verdict. Yeah. Do you still feel the same? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really tough question in one way, because these are bad people. These people are sick, and they do things that are so destructive. I mean, look what they did from the day I got there. And I don't know, a lot of people said, we have no choice but to elect Trump. Republicans, because he's the only one that can withstand this. Don't forget, if it weren't me, they'd be going after somebody else. And I know a lot of the competition, they wouldn't do so well.
Again, credit where credit is due. He's not wrong. If the Democrats didn't have Donald Trump to go after, they would go after somebody else, i.e. Bernie Sanders. Not once, but twice. And not just Bernie Sanders, progressives in general. Anyone to the left of the Democrats currently are barely to the left of George W. Bush. And let's put that into perspective. The man who brought us the 20 years global war on terrorism is basically where the Democratic Party is today, electorally, policy-wise, and what they're actually pursuing. Now, sure, on paper, all lives, well, not all lives, Black Lives Matter, and supporting LGBTQ community and so on and so forth. Oh, we should have stronger unions, right? But what do they actually do in terms of policy? When elected, how many Democrats truly follow through on those platform promises? Not many. And those who try get crushed, or in the case, some would argue, in the case of AOC, they become absorbed into the system and are used as I don't want to necessarily say scapegoats, but saying like, look, we have your progressives, and they're participating, and then instead of fighting, they end up capitulating. And this isn't going to be an AOC bashing hour. I'm just, unfortunately, there is some merit to this statements he's making.
They wouldn't be doing so well right now. They'd be saying, "Mommy, take me home. I want to go home." This is brutal.
And then he follows it up with
These are
that.
sick people. And for instance, the 51 intelligence agents. Who thinks of these? And they think about it just like they say, "I'm guilty of." And you know, all this information was from so many years before the election. You know, it's before the election. So
that's a great point, because so you're talking about the intel agencies. Obviously, you know, remember what Chuck Schumer said? He said, you know, if you tick off the intel agencies, they'll find a way to get you 6 ways a day. If you're elected, are you going to reform the intel community? What exactly are you going to do to make sure they don't target Americans like this?
Well, first of all, if you remember, when I took over, we had a guy named Comey. He was there. I didn't put him there. I didn't want him there.
Why are there random commercials?
And he tried to get me, and I reversed it on him. You know, some people said he cost Hillary the election, and he didn't want to. But he was a bad guy, not a capable guy, an evil guy. They were doing things that, I mean, I won't mention here because it's so conspiratorial. I don't want to be conspiratorial. It's too nice a show. But
what?
Bad guy. I fired him. Then I fired Strzok and Page and this one and that. Well, I got rid of that whole group of people, and we were doing great. Look, it's a very interesting question, and I say it, and it sounds beautiful, right?
Okay. So this is part of the reason why I don't like listening to Trump speak, because what has he said in the past 30 seconds? Like, he's obviously said words that were strung together in sentences, but like, what did he actually say? He said he fired people, and then he brought up conspiracy and then didn't discuss anything to do with it, while still not answering the question. I want to know if this little line right up here, "My revenge will be success." Oh, wait. No, I think he did say that earlier. "My revenge will be success." Did he say that earlier?
Just had this verdict. Do you still feel the same? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really tough question in one way, because these are bad people. These people are sick, and they can withstand this. Don't forget, if brutal, but these are sick people. And
you're talking about the intel agencies. Obviously,
yeah, see, this is just. Let's get to the nitty-gritty
But,
here.
You know, people also say, can you bring the country together? And the answer is yes. Success will bring the country together, because I had it together. Before the China virus came in, I had it together. We really had it together.
The Jenna virus?
And
oh, China.
Stayed. I think it would have stayed. Everybody was doing better. The country was doing better than it had ever done. And we're going back to those same policies and then some.
Americans have lost a lot of trust in institutions, and I think there's been a lot of discussion, especially online and especially with young people. How do we rebuild that trust in institutions? The CIA, the FBI, all those institutions.
Yeah, you're right.
Some people think that one way to build trust is to declassify things that everyone's talking about. I know you talked earlier about, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. So if you were president, would you declassify, you can answer yes or no to these. Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah.
Would you,
I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
Attorney General, what are you, I mean, we talked about how you fix the DOJ, how you bring justice.
I mean, he said I mean, I don't know. I'm not. I guess I was looking for more substance in this to respond to, and it just seems like there's a lot of leading questions. I mean, of course you would want to declassify the 9/11 Commission. Of course you would want to declassify the GFK documentations, and of course you would want to declassify the Epstein files. I mean, that is literally on my website, is to make public the Epstein flight logs. As far as declassifying the JFK and 9/11, I mean, those are like major conspiracies that we do need to, if there's information that the government has at this point in time, I mean, we should be made aware of what that information is. Did Bush do 9/11? Was JFK an inside job? Right? What else is going on? I mean, hell, the government did declassify that we've had UFO sightings and actual interactions with extraterrestrial life. And like, I'm not trying to turn this into conspiracy theory hour, but like, the government basically admitted aliens exist in like what, 2018 or something like that. And because the economy was so stagnant, and because we were still struggling and are still struggling to this very day, most of us said, yeah, that's great. Now, can we have more, more money, pay us more, give us better wages? I don't know, give us worker rights, reduce rent or something. So there's plenty of things that can and should be declassified. I'm trying to get the substance out of this. My revenge will be success. Maybe I missed it already.
Back to this country. When we talk to people, people's faith in the system is shattered. Yeah. I mean, absolutely shattered. We've seen it in your fundraising numbers.
It should be.
So who do you choose? What kind of, do you have a name that you're top on your list?
I do have a couple, and one in particular. But I made a lot of good choices. I got that one wrong. I was very loyal to one because he was the first senator to endorse me. As soon as conflict came up, he ran for the hills. And actually, the second one, he ran for the hills. When he heard that he was going to be impeached, they were going to impeach him. And he was like a different person. I had to get rid of him. And I would say that was the one thing. One of the truly important positions is Attorney General. And I was very disappointed at both of those Attorney Generals. Jeff Sessions was, I don't blame myself too much. He was some position in Alabama, and he wanted to be so bad. And he was the first senator to endorse me. And again, I was sort of a civilian. I didn't have a lot of people. I didn't know that many senators. And he went to a rally in Mobile. The fact is that we had 72,000 people, so it wasn't that big a shot. But he came to me and he said, I'd love to be Attorney General. And I didn't see it. And then he came 3-4 times, and I said, just out of loyalty, I did it. And he ran for the hills because it's nasty. This is a nasty business. This is a nasty.
Okay. I think that's enough of that, to be perfectly honest. I think we're just hearing the Donald Trump hour here. That's not what we were going for. I was hoping for like some context to this revenge will be success, but I'm not hearing it, and I don't know what the history of me. Oh, okay. I was like, what? That was not the link I just put in.
One of the things putting a bid into the bond market is the U.S. April
reports.
Job openings data that
we got to
dropped.
it. I apologize.
We learned that in April, U.S. job openings fell to 8.059 million. The estimate had been for 8.35 million there. So maybe some good news for the Fed. Let's go to Bloomberg's Liz McCormick, who joins us now with more insight. I'm taking a look at the 10-year yield. I'm taking a look at the 2-year yield, and we are falling right now in reaction, Liz.
Yeah, Katie, this JOLTS number, like you mentioned, was below consensus. It was even below some of the numbers that from people that were already below consensus. So I think the bond market, we've had kind of a string of data that has kind of revived the hopes of how much the Fed will cut this year. And we know the JOLTS data is something Fed officials look at keenly. It's more forward-looking.
So to be clear on this, when they're talking about these numbers and that they're making decisions based on that, I am all but 100% certain they're talking about the Federal Reserve and i.e. interest rates. So the interest rates raised because wages were actually going up and the spending power of the working class was actually starting to increase. Believe it or not, we were actually sort of getting somewhere. And then the Federal Reserve hiked up interest rates because to curb inflation, to combat inflation, and then they have been sitting there for the past several years now. And the problem is it's only hurting consumers like you and me who would buy a car, who would buy a house, who would buy, I don't know, something, right? Invest in a business. It just even groceries or whatever. Small businesses are the ones that are being impacted the most. So when they are talking about the Fed, that's who they're talking about. And it grinds my gears that so much of this conversation about, oh, the jobs report, oh, the economy, oh, this, that, it has nothing to do with people like you and me. It has nothing to do about us. It has to do with rich people dictating to us how we should act or react or persist in this economy. And it's frustrating. So let's see what Liz McCormick has to say.
Than some of the other data. And yeah, yields were down to come into the day, and they're falling more off this. So I think, like you see now, fully priced for a cut in November, and, over 70% chance for one more. And for a while, we were kind of swiping away even one in recent weeks. So I think this data kind of leads to, of course, we have Friday, coming with the main jobs data. And tomorrow we have ISM services, which people are focused on. But I think the JOLTS data coming in below consensus was taken as a welcome thing for the bond market.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, there's still a lot of economic data left this week to chew on. And really all that matters, it feels like, yes, we got good news on JOLTS, but what's really going to matter is that Friday NFP report. When it comes to the Fed, though, does that really move the needle that much, or is inflation still just too high to actually cut rates right now?
Well, I think inflation is too high for them now, but I think they have started to.
So again, inflation is too high for the Federal Reserve. Again, the Federal Reserve, for those who don't know, is actually a private institution. It is not the government. So let me repeat myself. The Federal Reserve is not a wing or connected to the government in any sort of way. The Federal Reserve is a collective of the major banking institutions in America, and they dictate interest rates and terms to the federal government when it comes to, well, interest rates for one, but also how much money to print and how much to allocate to give back to the banks so that they can, lend or borrow or do whatever else. So the interest rates, inflation being still too high is a misnomer, especially because we can see that there are record profits in every single sector in our country, in every single industry, and not a single bit of that money has made it to wages. Not a single bit of that has made it to bonuses for workers. It's always been payouts for shareholders, dividends, or golden parachutes for the CEOs. So again, I thought we were going to get something more subjective. I guess I'm striking out left and right here.
Besides the kind of hawkish stance that we've seen lately, they're clearly concerned about the economy. They're trying to pull off, not having a recession and getting inflation down. So they're watching. I think Chairman Powell had said, I'll be concerned if there's kind of like undue or unexpected weakening in the economy. So they're watching. They don't want things falling off a cliff. But they, like you say, Katie, they do want some more softening in the labor market because they want inflation to come down.
There it is. Softening in the labor market. That's the word that they like to use to literally state we want to suppress wages. We want to suppress labor's influence in the economy. Like, that is verbatim what that means. She said it herself. Let's hear that again.
We want some more softening in the labor market because
softening in the labor market. That literally means wage suppression. That literally means making it harder for workers like you and me to have a voice, to have a stand, to have a greater slice of the pie. Egregious.
They want inflation to come down more. So I don't know if it'll change the Fed much. We're going to get their new dot plot next week, right? They were at 3 cuts. Many people think they'll go down to 2. But I think you're right that they're not going to completely change their calculus, but they'll be happy to see softening in the jobs data if we see it on Friday.
I'm going to give
away
this
so we're going to try this one. Yahoo Finance, I would imagine, is still reputable. This isn't, it shouldn't be biased.
The first of several looks we're getting at the labor market this week. And the state of the jobs market, obviously a huge catalyst for the Fed. But some economists saying we need to see a bit more moderation in the labor market before the FOMC can begin to cut rates. So what does this data tell us about the path forward here? To discuss, we've got Veronica Clark, Citi economist. We also have Marianne Bartels, Sanctuary's chief investment strategist, with us. Veronica, I want to start with you. Just talk to me about these JOLTS numbers. Markets coming off their lows in response, but not seeing too much upside activity. In terms of the economic picture, how critical is this data in your overall thesis?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty important data set, but it's kind of painting a similar picture to what we've seen in the last few months, where we know that demand for labor is definitely coming down. You see that very obviously in the overall job openings number declining, but also in a very low hiring rate. That's a really important detail of this.
So again, I love the verbiage that is used. hold on. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties here with the chat. Yeah, none of the chat has shown up. Interesting. There has been a little bit of communication going on here. Let's see. I apologize. Obviously, we're streaming so we can chat with one another on top of everything else. So, yeah, but I'm not seeing that anybody did say anything. That's weird. Should we... I don't see anything on... Shouldn't be a block list. Oh, goodness. XSplit is giving me more trouble than I was expecting. Okay, so we saw testing. All right, that's good. Thank you, Dre Romy. That's very weird. I wonder if, because of my ongoing and persistent Palestinian conversation, that we're getting a little soft, no, shadow banned, right? Well, let me see if I can say anything. All right, seems to be working. So feel free to chime in. But I did pause this for a reason. The job openings versus quits and hires. I mean, look at this: 3.5 million quits, while record layoffs, which aren't being mentioned, while a significant less amount of hires, and then, of course, the job openings themselves. So if you were to look at this objectively, it looks like there should be a surplus of, well, 3.5 million, or there should only be 3.5 million job openings average, right? Because of the openings, there should have been 5.6 that were hired, 3.5 that quit, right? No, there would be 2.5. There should be 2.5 openings left, right? 2.5 plus 5.6 is 8.1, right? I can math. But that's not what we're seeing, right? These numbers are being presented in a way that is somewhat misleading, and of course, they are being treated in isolated ways. And I'm sorry, I'm quickly distracted. How did you feed something to the dragon pets? I wasn't even aware that I had that extension still at all. So be careful if you see things on the stream. I don't know where those bits might end up, okay? But back to this. 3.5 million quits and record layoffs with significantly lower hires, but there's allegedly 8.1 million openings. That doesn't seem to add up, right? And it does correlate to what most of people like you and me are saying is nobody's hiring. Like there's places, there's job openings on Indeed. If you call any particular go on the company website and look at positions or careers or whatever, yeah, there's plenty of things on there. But how many people are getting callbacks? How many people are getting interviews? How many people are getting those offers? And what's worse is that employers, companies, are acting more and more tyrannical every single day. We're seeing bosses acting like tyrants more and more often. We're seeing employee dissatisfaction rising. 3.5 million people quitting jobs is literally 3% of the entire workforce. 3% of the entire workforce. 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but 3% is what 3.5 million is out of the 155 million person workforce, right? That's what's a city? Let's put this into better perspective. Which American city has a population near 3.5 million? Denver metro area. That is like the entire Denver metro area not working. Like not a single soul in Denver, Colorado working. That's what that 3.5 million is. And that's the equivalent of basically two Denvers maybe getting hired as well. So maybe that helps with the perspective, I guess. So this is what we're seeing. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's what the openings are, that's what the quits are, that's what the hires are. I hope that clarifies what we're seeing here.
JOLTS data, we definitely see that hiring is pulling back. It's still a favorable sign that layoffs are still low, but that would really be the last step of a
Where's the
weakening labor
numbers?
market, and we definitely see.
Let's see, what are the layoff numbers? Current layoff numbers, America. So, oh, I see, 1.2%. Okay, well, if 3.55, if 3.5 million people quitting is 3%, then 1.2% would be about 1 million people. So 1 million people are getting laid off, 3.5 million people are quitting, and only 5.6 million were getting hired, which would mean that is a disparity of 1 million. We've brought in 5.6 and 4.7 or 4.6 have left. That is filling the gap by 1 million. Those are the numbers that we are not discussing. And that's why, okay, remember how I said that misinformation is not necessarily just blatant lies and propaganda. Misinformation is also the misrepresentation of facts or not presenting data in a way that is logical or consistently understood, right? And that isn't to say that it has to be spoon-fed to the general populace. But if we're not prepared or experienced with consolidating this data and analyzing this data, because unless you're a political or finance junkie, trust me, you probably don't care and never have cared and probably never will care, even though these numbers do impact your every single day life. And that's one of the things. We lack, generally speaking, this ability to sift through the cracks of information because we have been geared, we have been trained, we have been basically bamboozled our entire lives to just accept inputs and spit out outputs, right? We are given data and accepting it as fact or as is without being even given the opportunity to try and extrapolate from that data. And those of us who try get crushed. And so when you do that generation over generation, year after year, it does hinder people's ability to critically analyze information as it's presented to them. Then there's the Google effect, and now it's the AI effect. Why should I have to memorize information or be able to critically analyze information if I can just ask the Google or the AI and be like, hey, chat, is it true about the stocks? Yes. All right, great, cool. Or be like, hey, chat, what are the numbers today? These are the numbers. And you just accept that. Because we have been, and I don't want to say this word because it has negative connotation, but we've been groomed to accept technology blindly and to accept these kinds of resources blindly. And most of the time we're given facts and data. It's like, oh, wow, yeah, those numbers, man, those are numbers, all right. But we don't actually know what they mean, but we're told to accept them as is.
Signs that businesses are looking to cut labor costs by not hiring.
And Marianne, want to get your read in on this as well as what the Fed is going to be looking for in the economic data coming in the form of the employment situation later on this week, and then additionally a little bit more of a read on the labor situation and employment and labor market more broadly as we get even readings like this as far back looking as they may be for JOLTS. We get a little bit more active with the ADP and brought more in line with the jobs report later on this week too. What's the Fed going to be looking for?
So I think the Fed is looking at a broad set of economic data. Of course, they're looking at jobs. That's very critical. They're looking at inflation measures. Yesterday, we had the ISM manufacturing, and that dipped below 50, a little bit of softness. Prices came down, but the employment number in there actually was a little bit stronger. So now we get the JOLTS, and we're getting some softness. So you're seeing some mixed data. That's very normal. But I really think the Fed is still very focused on inflation. And I do think inflation can continue to come down. And we're still forecasting that the Fed should be able to cut rates.
See, this is the thing. This is a normal inflation rate. And what is normal and what is inflation, right? Let's go ahead and do definition of inflation, just so we're all on the same page. A general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. That's what it is. A general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. Inflation occurs when the prices of goods and services increase over a long period of time, causing your purchasing power or the amount of goods and services you can buy with a single unit of currency to decrease. Right? This is the baseline definition of inflation. The value of the dollar has gone down. That is why the numerical cost of goods has gone up. But 3% is pretty much what countries go for. What is the ideal rate of inflation? So the Fed has stated on numerous occasions that its goal is an annual inflation rate of 2%. Okay, 2%. We're at 3.4. That's a 1.4 increase higher, 50% for you number junkies. Does that justify a 7% interest rate on loans and mortgages and auto thing? Does that justify the skyrocketing cost of goods in the past several months? No, it doesn't. And so that's why when we talk about inflation without additional context or without comparing it to the skyrocketing cost of goods and the record profits, along with the record layoffs and quits and lack of hiring, we're not getting the full picture. So that's why you got me.
By 25 basis points in September. And again, that's as long as the data is supportive. We do think that they'll cut rates. And we think that's supportive of the bond market and the equity market.
Well, I want to talk to you both actually about the big R elephant in the room of a potential recession. Veronica, starting with you. You know, it's so fascinating how quickly things change, right? Because just a couple of weeks ago, we had PMI breaking out. The economy was too hot. Now, all of a sudden, the economy potentially too cold. People freaking out about the Atlanta Fed's GDP numbers. Are you seeing any evidence in the data about a potential recession? And if so, what are you looking at?
Yeah, no, we absolutely do. That's actually still in our base case that we're going to see just further weakening in the labor market, further weakening in activity and spending. You've already seen signs that, in the first quarter of this year and in April, consumption is really starting to slow down. We had those revisions lower to consumption in Q1 last week. Residential investment, which was a really big support for Q1 GDP.
So they're using a lot of technical words, but it amounts to this. People are spending less money because people have less money to spend. People are buying less houses because there are less houses to buy that are affordable.
GDP growth, that is now turning. You've seen housing, turning again, construction falling, home sales falling. And to us, it does look like, this is a weakening labor market on the brink of an even weaker labor market, even further, job loss that we're going to get in the coming months.
So a little bit of pessimism from you there, Veronica, but Marianne, I mean, we're still near all-time highs, right? We're coming off of them, but we're still in this bull market. So where are you on the...
Let's hear that again. Let's hear that again before I go off on my tangent. Not her. No offense, but...
We're still near all-time highs, right? We're coming off of them, but we're still in this bull market. So,
bull market. What's that mean? Well, for those of you who aren't into cryptocurrency or stocks, a bull market means you be making the money on the things that you bought, right? So Tesla stock, I'm sure everybody's familiar with that, or Amazon or what have you, right? So a bull market is you bought your stock a year, 2 years ago, and then collectively everybody bought their stocks 2 years ago, right? And then over the next 2 years, just prices keep going up and up and up and up and up. Because people keep buying, because people keep believing in the power of the whatever. The market in general does well, and it continues to grow, right? The rich get richer, the poor get actually somewhat more. Yay, nice. The 401ks are going up, right? That's the bull market. A bear market is when the spending pressure is dominating the decisions and the processes and the inflows and the incomes and the finances, right? And that's when the stock prices go down. Now, a bull market or a bear market is the collective, not just, one company. One company suffering a loss is one company suffering a loss. An entire sector suffering a loss could be construed as a bear market or some sort of other market condition. Now, Papa Ronan's, professor hat coming off. This is exactly why it is not just dangerous, but extremely, extremely misleading to conflate the economy and the strength thereof with the stock market. Because the stock market has nothing to do with the economy. It is literally the pulse, if you will, the health of businesses in America. Typically the Dow and the S&P 500. AZV, welcome to the channel. Does that stand for anything? Are those your initials? Or is this just a brand new account that you made just so you could be a part of the the secession revolution? But yeah, I think we're going to hear some very disingenuous discussion about the bull market and the stocks being at record highs. Why is everything happening? Why is the economy struggling right now?
Where are you on the kind of recession to no recession scale?
So I use anecdotal evidence. I'm not officially an economist. And I'm sure if you've been out at restaurants, they're completely packed, and not just on the weekends. I've been flying the past 2 months. Every flight I've been on has been completely packed. The consumer's still spending, however, selectively. And I think as long as the consumer...
No. Mary Ann Bartels, Sanctuary Chief Investment Strategist. Ma'am. If you're saying that people are spending their money because you see a lot of people on the airplanes, that is a specific class of people who can afford airplane tickets. The bottom 50% of Americans are struggling to pay for gas, pay for groceries, pay for light, electricity, their housing, let alone their vehicles, let alone their just ability to exist, right? A tie and a vest and a dress shirt is a luxury. This microphone, that webcam, this computer setup, the internet is a luxury. This phone versus a Nokia, a luxury. These are things that people cannot typically afford right now. And it's because these things are becoming priced out of the ability of the general consumer to purchase. When McDonald's, friggin' McDonald's, fast food restaurants are being priced at the same rate as a sit-down restaurant, meaning I would spend $18 for myself for a Big Mac meal? A Big Mac meal, a large Big Mac with a large Big Mac with fries meal is like $18 now throughout the country. I could get a steak at Texas Roadhouse for $20. So no, that is not how that is, Miss Ma'am.
Consumer is spending. I don't see a recession, considering the consumer such an important component of the economy. But when it comes to the stock market, it's earnings. And the seasonality of estimates normally start coming down. And what we're actually seeing is the opposite. Analysts are taking their numbers up. And with the strong earnings backdrop, we're still very bullish. We never said sell in May and go away.
So what they're talking about is that the stock market fluctuates like just about anything else, right? So the stock market is rich people's feelings. It does have some value, right? Like if a company is worth $1 trillion and has stocks, those stocks are supposed to equal the value of the business at any given time, right? So that valuation is supposed to be legitimate, except market conditions, and this is where things get a little wibbly wobbly, right? The academic economy, the supply, the demand, and the factors that determine both, right? People's ability to spend, companies' ability to provide, the weather, what have you, the supply chain and all that other fun stuff, right? That's the academic on text, what you learn in college economy, right? And so the stock market does have some elements of that, right? The thing is, these ebbs and flows largely have nothing to do with any real bearing to actual indicators that you would learn in a textbook. What it really is more so a volume-based and trend-based proportional stratification and statistic breakdown of cost basis for a business. And that is a tongue twister that I said and I understand, and it is confusing to say, right? So how can we break this down? The stock market is essentially like a wave. So consider, what is it? Low tide, right? Low tide, and then it goes into high tide, then it goes back into low tide. And this just goes on in perpetuity. That's the stock market. It be going up, and then it be going down. Fundamentally, that's what happens. And there's a lot of words, there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of nerds with computers and algorithms saying, well, this is the why it went up, and this is the why it went down. And in reality, what she's trying to say here is that, oh no, things are still good on the up portion. And that's might be true. It doesn't actually matter if it is true, because what matters is as it starts to come down, right, as it's been happening today, and when you have other conditions such as job losses, quits, and then layoffs on top of that, with wage suppression and the suppression of consumer spending power, which, say what you will, people really do drive the economy. If you can't spend money, you can't make money, and if you can't make money, you can't hire people to help you make the money from the idea that you had, right? It still takes a collective to make the whole thing work. I could go on a soapbox, and I will address that in 2 seconds. I could go on a soapbox and discuss my economic policy here, but to the point and to this point, we'll hold off on that. Isn't the stock market generally moving upwards over the span of decades? The short answer is yes, with several exceptions, crashes, right? But usually there is a bounce back. And in general, the stock market does go up because businesses tend to make money over time, right? Because if businesses just would continuously collapse, so too would the stock market. But just like cryptocurrency and fiat currency and WoW Gold and Final Fantasy 14 Gil and the auction house, the value, the intrinsic value of a stock or the market as a whole only rises because of the amount of involved parties, right? You're not going to buy a stock and just let it fall to pieces. You're going to continue to sell the stock. You're going to, you made it, by the way, Oshun. You're going to continue to spread awareness of the stock, right? You're going to highlight this product. You're going to continue to encourage other people investing. That's literally how the movie Dumb Money, highlighting the meme stocks, GameStop and I believe it was Toys R Us and several others, Kohl's, a couple other companies. The reason why retail investors, regular people, not a lot of money, were able to get rich so quickly is because we built the hype out of nowhere, which proved two things. Stocks are arbitrary and anybody can influence it. As long as you can influence it with enough money or numbers, you can artificially inflate the game. So, to your point, the general momentum is up, but how much of that is actually natural progression? And how much of that is actually the benefit of the business? How much of that is actually benefiting the business? How much of that is the actual growth of the business? GameStop became a Fortune 500 company overnight because of Reddit. That had nothing to do with the CEO. That had nothing to do with principles or anything else. It had nothing to do with the business of GameStop. Nothing other than Reddit, diamond hands, and foolishness like that. So I hope that answers your question that yes, generally speaking, the stock market will rise, which is why with investment advice, if anybody ever gives you any advice in stocks or investment and they say day trade or buy and sell early, they're lying to you. If you're going to invest and you're afraid to lose money, thank you, Oshun, for gifting to our viewers, whoever got that. I hope you get your money's worth. But with investment, you have to invest over the long term if you want to actually see gains. And that's that's not me saying it. That's not just experts saying it. That if you think about it, it's kind of a common sense thing, right? If I have this pocket knife and I take care of it, it's going to last longer. I will get more worth out of it. It will give me more value over time. But if I constantly am using this knife, right, cutting, I snap the blade, I'm banging it against the floor, I drop it, right? It loses its value because it's being abused. So now it's like, oh crap, I gotta hurry up and sell this knife so I can get what little value I have left out of it. It's the same thing how vehicles depreciate versus appreciate, because they wear so much easily, or so much more than, say, a house. A house can stay standing for hundreds of years. A car's engine will go kaput. It will wear and tear. The frame will rust, and therefore it does not retain value. That's just capitalism, I guess. The value of a stock depends on what the market is willing to pay, even if the market is buying it is just a joke. Yeah, I mean, that's why when people talk about capitalism as being the greatest economic system on the planet, they say that because we live in America and we see some of the benefits of capitalism. But what we're discussing currently are the negative consequences of capitalism. When you don't regulate capitalism, when you allow it to take advantage of people, when you allow it to dictate the terms, that is when things become a problem. For instance, if there was a law, which is in my website, www.samronan.com, if there was a law in place that mandated that companies had to split 50% of profits equally among their employees every single quarter, every single year, we wouldn't have these problems. And then the stock market would have justification for growing, because the more money it makes, the more it redistributes into the workforce, the more they can spend, the more the money makes. And that actually wouldn't cause inflation. The reason why is because the spending power only ever increases rather than just the cost. Now, sure, fine, people would probably end up raising their costs, and then you would have this rampant price increasing, which is, again, a reason why just raising wages is not enough to deal with economic climates. So, let's see. Oh, you gave it to our brand new follower. What? 2 lucky ducks. Well, that means you guys are going to be at least watching me for the next 30 days. I'll take it. No, but economics is as simple or as difficult and as complex as we make it, right? If you're rich, you buy real estate, you put your money in offshore bank accounts, you keep all of your wealth in assets or in stock options. You never actually have money. You never give yourself a salary. Then you borrow money off of those assets, and then that's how you continue to buy more assets, right? You leverage your capital and your assets against other things to acquire more things to have assets and whatever else. Poor people, all we can do is go get a job and save our money, right? Make a wage, save our money. Maybe we can invest, but what's 100% return on $100? $100. So now you're at 200. Unless it's compounding at that rate daily or weekly, you will never, ever be able to retire off of $100, right? But $100 every single month, compounding 5% annually over 30 years, that's retirement money. That's what they recommend to do for your 401k. So there is a difference, is I guess what I'm trying to get at. And in order to address economic inflation, or to deal with, I guess, economic problems and shortfalls, you have to address the price gouging of corporations, the lack of profit sharing by corporations. Thank you. You have to address the taxation and how and that impacts the spending power of citizens. And then, yes, there have to be provisions in place to prevent rampant price raising. Right? That is how you put a stop or a limit to the rate of inflation. Because at a certain point, being a billionaire doesn't matter if it costs $1 million to get a slice of bread. Right? And that's exactly what happened in post-World War II Germany, where they just printed a crap ton of money and made it worthless. And then that's where you saw that the numbers printed on the paper were worth less than the paper itself, and so they were using it to kindle fire. I think we can get back to the video, maybe. Sorry about that.
Actually said buy in May, but sell by Labor Day. Looking for that seasonality correction around September and October. But we're still pretty bullish. We're still looking for 5,600 to 5,800 on the S&P. So we think, there's clear sailing for the markets from here.
Yeah.
Is the labor theory of value one of the things you believe has the capacity to combat price gouging? So let me be on the same page with you. Labor theory of value. Let me be on the same page with you. The labor theory of value argues that the economic value of a good or service is determined by the total amount of socially necessary labor required to produce it. It is central to Marxist theory, and he took that theory, which was developed by David Ricardo, and constructed it in a societal manner. So, do I think that theory, as expressed, could have the capacity to combat price gouging? Yes and no. Currently, under capitalist, our current deregulated economy, companies can set their prices however they want. And so when there is a shortfall of supply, the demand causes the cost to go up, right? Allegedly. But when that supply is artificially reduced, i.e. with the housing market, with jobs, layoffs, and this, that, and the other, that's where the price gouging comes into play, right? What this theory is talking about, as far, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the socially necessary labor, meaning if there isn't a social, like a high demand or social need for, say, Ferraris, 40,000 square foot mansions, would those things have a equal and parallel value? I think so. I think that would be accurate, and I think we do see that reflected. Now, when it comes to goods and services, right, like food, water, clothing, maybe not necessarily nice clothing, but clothing in general, shelter and housing, this is when we start getting into the concept of what should be considered a natural right, a human right, and therefore free access to, quote unquote. What should be publicly owned? What should be privately owned? Where do we strike the balance? If that is the question that this is asking fundamentally, then I would say in terms of food, shelter, clothing, water, utilities, right? Electricity, water, sewage, the internet, I would include in all that. And then, yes, cellular bandwidth, telecom. These things should be public goods, to include healthcare, to include education. These should be public goods. And they should have that value intrinsic to the amount of workforce that is necessary to maintain it. Same thing with the railway system, right? If we built a railway system and we allowed it to be privately funded, then those private entities would be able to charge whatever they want for passage, and whether that's passenger rail or freight rail. And the workers will have no say. The labor will not have a say. And I think that is where this, I believe, alludes to, is that the economic value of a good or service is determined by the total amount of socially necessary labor. If there is a lot of social labor required to maintain the railway system, then the value should reflect that. But what do we mean by value? A capitalist will mean, well, then we should charge more, right? Because it's more valuable. But I would argue that it should be as affordable as possible, so that most of the, or as much of the people who rely on it or could utilize it have access to it. So the theory of value, or labor as the theory of value, I think is one part of the puzzle, one piece of the puzzle. And I think on principle, it does lead us in the correct direction, which is There needs to be a clear separation of public-owned goods and services that will never be privatized, that will just not be allowed to be privatized, and those things that can be privatized and should be privatized because they're luxury goods, they are not necessary. A cell phone, this particular one, is not necessary. Being able to communicate is, right? And by the way, it was the United States military who helped invent Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and radio communications in the first place, which is what this is fundamentally operating off of. The internet was explicitly created by the Department of Defense in 1967, and the first email was sent, hey, something stupid like that. Hey, I want a pizza or something dumb. Also taxpayer dollars, right? And of course, our natural resources, water, electricity, gas, should also be accessible. And then the things that we need, hospital and education, healthcare, those are things that should never go into the private hands, and they have that intrinsic value. I would also say that this could be interpreted, and again, I keep going back to the definition because I'm not familiar with the theory of Marx. To be perfectly fair, to be perfectly upfront and honest, I am not familiar with Marxist theory. I'm not familiar with socialist theory. I'm not familiar with anarchist theory, right? I am somewhat familiar with capitalist theory insofar as Adam Smith was the father of capitalism, and he himself said that a business's responsibility is to give back to the community and the workers that provided for it in the first place, right? So that's about as far into that theory as I go. My economic policies, stances, and considerations are based off of numbers and facts, and how the real world applications thereof are impacted, right? If a company makes a lot of money and doesn't redistribute that money into the workforce, but instead depresses that workforce, then that workforce cannot contribute to the money, which cannot, or to the business, which can then not generate money, which causes a spiraling effect, which is what we're currently seeing. We are seeing the consequences of arrogant actions of CEOs. Oh, let's just lay them off. In fact, there was this one CEO, I forget what his name was, but he was like, who'd have thunk that laying off 1,500 people would have had negative consequences on our business's ability to operate. Like, these people don't live in reality, right? And that isn't to say that you can have infinite growth in a finite system, but it is to say that if the system continues to support itself, it will last longer and it will support itself in a much better way. So, I gotta deny these cookies because can't read this article unless I give it access to all of my PII. Let's see. So the cost of production theory of value is the theory that the price of an object or condition is determined by the sum of the cost of the resources that went into making it. That's supply and demand. The cost can comprise any of the factors, which is what Adam Smith said historically, who also developed the water-diamond paradox. The things which have the greatest value in use have frequently little or no value in exchange, right? So I love that. The greatest value is your time, but you can't exchange your time other than in, say, like labor. And you're selling your time, your time in the form of labor for extremely low amounts of money, right? Even if you're making $25 an hour, you're selling your time for $25 an hour. And I don't have cash on me, but a $20 bill and a $5 bill every hour is what you're selling yourself for. And when you really think about that, that's insane. Because if you live in New England like I do, this is $2,000, this space. And when you think about the amount of time that you have to spend to make that kind of money after taxes, to put this little pile of money away and give it to somebody else entirely so that you can sleep, eat, and be warm or cool or dry is ludicrous. And it's impressive that this, well, I shouldn't say it's impressive, it's the theory, right? So it's interesting to see it spelled out in such a way. I'm going to get sidetracked. I apologize.
It's really interesting. It's a great point, Marianne. And Veronica, I'd love to get the economist perspective from you because based on some FactSet data during the months of April and May, analysts actually did increase EPS estimates in aggregate for the second quarter. What does that tell you about the strength of the consumer right now?
Yeah, I'm not an equity strategist by any means. We listened to earnings calls, and it did seem like consumers had a bit of a pullback, even consumer equities in the earnings that we've heard over the last couple weeks, and we definitely see that in the hard data. I mean, it's been 3 of the last 4 months where real goods spending has declined. Restaurant spending in real terms has declined for 4 of the last 5 months. So I do think we're seeing a pullback in this more discretionary type of expenditure. Delinquency rates on credit cards that have well surpassed 2019 levels.
So that's scary because that's alluding to the same conditions that happened in the 2008 housing crisis, the 2012 crash, and the 2013 recession as well. When people are relying more on credit and debt to get through their day-to-day, their needs, that's when problems start to happen, right? Because that means people are making enough money to get by, which means they're spending money that they don't actually have. They can't pay off the credit cards, which are now accumulating 18, 20%, 24%, 30% in interest, which is going to be insurmountable. And then they default, as she just said. And this is exactly how economic crises happen, except every time they happen, the poor lose everything and the rich gobble it all up, which is what we're seeing currently with the housing market. This is a terrifying 6-minute video. And we're already an hour into the stream, and it doesn't feel like we've been talking for but like 5 minutes.
It is favorable that unemployment is still low, but as people become more worried about employment prospects, and we see that in some survey data, we see that in the low quit rate in this JOLTS data. If spending pulls back even more, that does create an even bigger pullback for these consumer businesses.
Yeah, maybe that's telling us Dollar Tree will be the most important report of this week here.
I mean, he's making fun, but I mean, Dollar Tree's prices have skyrocketed too. And that used to be the go-to place. If you couldn't afford groceries at Walmart, you went to Dollar Tree. And when you can't afford to go to Dollar Tree, you starve. So again, the value of labor, the value of products, supply and demand, this, that, and the other. When you don't regulate price gouging, people's lives become threatened. And that's why if we're not going to take a responsible approach to economics, a moral approach to economics, and start drawing hard lines in the sand of what can and cannot be played with in the stock market or in the free market, this kind of stuff is just going to continue. Now, I'm kind of curious what this one's about, but I know AI is a fun one, so let's do a bit of some levity here. Let's see what this AI video is all about.
A lot of people don't know this, but if you have a Zillow app on your phone, you could be using it to make over $10,000.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'm glad. I'm actually glad this ad showed up because this is just as predatory as everything else. No, there are not. So AZV asked, are there limits on the price of gas, milk, and bread in the USA? No. There is no cap on goods. There are laws against price gouging. There are times, like during environmental weather emergencies, where you are not allowed to change the price of goods at all. It is illegal. But that isn't also universal, right? Like that's just in places where there's hurricanes or tornadoes or earthquakes a lot, right? That's not a universal law either, other than the price gouging. So that's what I'm talking about right there. What you just said is exactly the kind of economic policy I would propose and fight for in America. Like there needs to be some things held in high regard, right? We need to be able to take our hands off certain things, and food, the necessities should be one of them. Of course, healthcare. Regulate healthcare for one. Standardize the cost of care. Get rid of insurance companies altogether. Let them restructure into a different insurance product. But get the hell out of healthcare. Quit denying people cancer treatment. Quit denying people fillings. Quit denying people glasses. Quit denying people mental health care. Quit denying people treatment. The Dollar Tree prices literally went up by 25%. Everything is now $1.25. That sounds like very little, but it's significant for people living in poverty. And that's true. So, $15 an hour, right? Fight for 15. Over the course of the year is $31,200 annual income. But you know you're getting taxed out the ass. So let's times it by 0.6 for a 40% income tax hit to pay state, local, and federal taxes. You're left with $18,720, which divided by 12, not 121, is $1,560. Where in America can you get an apartment for $1,500 a month? And then say you can get an apartment. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you can find an apartment that's, say, $900 a month. Your utilities are going to be at least $80 for gas, $80 for water, $80 for electricity. So that's another $240. We're at $1,140 already out of $1,560. Now you have to have $420 to live off for the rest of the month. Well, guess what? Groceries for an adult male, myself, at the very least, and I'm buying cheap meat and mashed potatoes and flavoring it with like the kimyon or something, teriyaki sauce, the yum yum sauce, right? That's it. That's what I eat. And I'm getting like these little cookies, the Goya cookies. Yeah. I spend at most $50 a week on myself on food. I try to anyway. I think I average between 50 to 75 if I'm being really smart and focused on my thing. So 50 is 200, 75 is 300 to eat. So that leaves you $120 for the whole month. Gas prices the way they are, to fill up my Kia Forte is $30 a tank. And depending on commuting, that's each week. There's your money. There's literally your money. $15 an hour. And that's if your rent's $900. If your rent, which like here in New Hampshire, the lowest rent I saw when I was coming out here was $12.50. And I just mentioned at least $600 worth of expenses. And that's assumed, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot car insurance. I forgot car insurance, my bad. And your phone and the internet. Jesus. I mean, you see how this just keeps going up. $60 for a plan for your phone, $80 for the internet. And nowadays, there's another $140 if you're probably paying for a phone. I mean, poverty is so real. It is so real, and it is so difficult to overcome because, again, you don't even have the chance to breathe. You are literally living down to the penny, if you're lucky. If you're even able to live within those means, chances are you have to find resources elsewhere. Get a roommate, have air for dinner. So, yeah. That's actually crazy. America is the wealthiest nation. I am not from a big country, but there is a limit on every essential item like gas, milk, bread, electricity bill, and water bill. If I may ask, what country are you from? Because what I'm about to say next is I do believe most European countries do have those provisions. But again, I don't want to speak out of turn, so what I will do is look that up. How many countries have a limit on cost of necessary goods? I think that's the right way to phrase that question. So Bloomberg, which I get it, very conservative. Oman, okay. Oman. Let's see. Limits the cost of essential goods. Yeah. Let's see. Well, actually, according to what I'm finding on the internet, it looks like that's not going to remain in place for much longer, which isn't great. The Omani government, along with many state-owned enterprises, further deleveraged its balance sheet over 2023, a process which, in our view, has further to run. The fiscal and economic reforms, especially those aimed at achieving operational efficiencies and stronger financial profiles for state-owned enterprises, will continue. The outlook reflects that the government's balance sheet will strengthen and the economic reform program could lead to faster than expected deleveraging in many state-owned enterprises. That is corporate speak and capitalist speak for the privatization and decentralization of the economy, meaning those protections are like okay, you're saying they're being raised, but just like with NHS and other countries facing the onus of privatizing healthcare, what's happening is alt-right conservatives and extremely strong right-wingers are gaining more and more power in political circles, and influencing government decisions who have private interests. And because they have private interests, they don't care about sabotaging the established good of the social programs, accessibility, or what have you. They want to make money. And how do you make money? By exploitation, by disrupting something that the state or the agency has established and is well maintained. You cut funding to it, you cut support to it, you cut infrastructure to it, and then you go on Twitch, Fox News, and you say, see, you can't even go to the hospital anymore because the damn government is preventing you from finding your own doctor at your own time, at your own expense, with your own dollars because they hate you. But if you vote for me and if you allow my partners at the We Will Kill You factory to privatize your health care, we'll let you get in real good and quick, and it'll only cost you a dime. That's what's happening. Exactly. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. I know not every country has the same freedom of speech that we do, so discussing or criticizing governments could be risky. But I appreciate that. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I'm not quite familiar where Oman geolocation. I'm not quite familiar where that is. Images. Maps. Yikes. Struggling out here, folks. Struggling. Okay, so I thought it was a Middle Eastern country. It seems to be off of the little African horn there. So I was right. I just didn't want to go live on the internet and say, oh, Oman's in the Middle East, right? And it was actually like South America or something. Well, that's good. Nobody's coming after you. Awesome. Yeah, one of the reasons why people said that I should use a fake name for Twitch is in case I get doxxed, because I am talking about politics, and that's very, of course, contentious. And I am very much so challenging the voice of conservatives and liberals. So, yeah, I could get doxxed. And in fact, when I ran for office, I actually had death threats, which was silly. Nothing ever came of it, of course. I'm still alive, and I'm not in prison for self-defense. But we definitely got off track. No, but we had a great conversation. People are probably wondering why did we pause on Foreclosure Academy, Karen, and over $10,000 a month? Here's why. Let's listen to this.
See, we think when a house goes into foreclosure, we lose all the money and there's nothing to recoup.
This 6 minute and 22-second commercial is going to tell you, hey, get into real estate, get into foreclosures, go into Section 8 housing, get into house flipping. Hey, go on to Zillow, right? Go to Zillow, copy and paste the address, go to your bank and buy it and then flip it or try and sell it to somebody else. You'll make $20,000 every single time and you'll be rich. These are scam artists taking advantage of vulnerable people, like the people making $15 an hour or less, who are struggling to survive in this economy because, again, of rampant price gouging, not inflation, price gouging, the lack of wage increase, the lack of profit sharing, and, again, the lack of accessibility and the rising cost of necessities such as housing, food, and clothing. Transportation, I believe, is the other one. So I despise seeing these ads. I don't like seeing the reels because even if you do look it up, oh, go to Zillow, download my app. They want $20 for the app. And then you're like, okay, so why would I even bother doing this? I have to pay you, the grifter, $20 to use the product that may or may not actually make me money. or it's, okay, how do I actually get the loan? So many liberals on Twitch. Interestingly enough, you're right. There are a lot of liberals on Twitch. I found that quite surprising. Personally, I thought Twitch would have been more conservative because gamers, right? And using the gamer words. Obviously, there are heavy moderations, and I think you do get channel strikes. I think you get channel strikes if you swear or use specifically derogatory language like the N-word, for instance, right? That'll get you got. Of course, threatening people or anything like that, that'll get you got regardless. That's inciting violence. But it is surprisingly left-leaning on Twitch. Very surprising, especially since Amazon bought it. You would think it would have shifted in some way. But if Twitch is too left-leaning or liberal for you, Kick is actually the streaming service that caters more to conservative streamers, content creators, and conservative-friendly rhetoric. In fact, if you go on Twitch and you type in tags, categories, language, English, search tags, politics, you'll see Hasanabi, left, Central Committee, left, TYT, left, Hutch, left, Jay Marine, left, Jay Arlington, left. But if you scroll all the way down, I believe I saw, where are they? Hey, there's me. Whoop, whoop. I'm in the channel. I believe WorldViewTube is conservative. Todd in Minnesota, probably, because he's listening to Tucker Carlson. There was another one. I thought it was like Real News or Real Talk or something like that. But yeah, anywho. Yeah, the left-leaning streaming platform for your little news heart content is in fact Twitch, which is one of the reasons why I am streaming on it. If I had access to fiber optic, I would also be streaming simultaneously to Facebook, YouTube, and Kick, because I have no qualms about getting into fisticuffs, verbally speaking, well, and physically speaking, on the issues. So, Corn Dog Champion. I guess I'm. Let me ask you: are you more conservative leaning, or are you more liberal leaning? Now, to be clear, liberal is quite conservative nowadays on the political spectrum. They are left of the Republican Party, but they are on the right side, as in the right half of the political spectrum. And if that ever gets confusing, the true political spectrum. So, the political line spectrum is typically the left-right spectrum. And let's see, its origins in the French Revolution, ideological groupings, blah, 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 blah. Where's the, I guess I have to go to the images. I thought we could get a nice wiki article out of it. But I guess all we're getting here, like we need to show like actual definitions of it so that we can have an actual conversation and not like, you know, you're a liberal because of whatever. So I'm not seeing a very quick and easy. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I think I found it. Excellent. I am not on either side. I do think either really exist. It's just a puppet show for the mindless masses. I mean, I won't argue that, and I have said that both parties will literally parrot the same exact talking points and just change the names. It's pretty ridiculous. Feel free to print out as a high-res PDF. I don't want to print it out. I just want to see the damn picture. Jesus. Okay. Here we go. Here we go, folks. The post-left outside the political spectrum to the left of the far left. Rule by unspoken context or by temporary and powerless leaders. No institutions, lawless, moneyless, and timeless. That is the absolute far left. Slightly to the right of that. No state, extreme limitation of power, local currencies, jubilees, etc. Extreme limits on energy consumption, power, and complexity of institutions and of technology. The far left, as actually defined as the far left. Rule by workers' councils, direct democracy, or middle-class intellectuals. Like every other position in the Overton window, official and unofficial, fundamentally civilized, technophilic, literalist, relativist, domesticated. Scattered examples in history, the Spanish Civil War, pre-Bolshevik Soviet Russia, and Makhnovist Ukraine. The left. So the left is the first segment of this spectrum, right? Here's the center. The left, the far left is what I just explained, the extreme left, right? So we just said the far left, which is Makhnovist Ukraine, pre-Bolshevik Soviet Russia, and scattered the Spanish Civil War, right? So that's the far left. The real left would be rule by intellectuals and professionals overseeing democratic welfare state, heavy restrictions on wealth acquisition, privatization, etc. Heavily unionized workplaces, heavily subsidized public services, small or non-existent military. But through the 1950s, so examples, from the 1950s through the 1970s, Britain, Scandinavia, and Cuba came very close to exhibiting the left on the Overton window. So, let's see. Let's get back to chat here. Neoliberals have moved the Overton window so impossibly right there are virtually no leftist voices in the mainstream. That's true. Both conservatives and Democrats seem to have the same foreign policy approach. They do. In fact, as we can see, the Biden administration literally just wrote a executive order limiting immigration. That's a conservative wet dream, and they were complaining about it because it wasn't soon enough. Not that it was happening, but that it wasn't soon enough. But I'm enjoying reading the center here, which, although it's not actually giving an example of the center, interesting. The right. It's giving a definition for that. Rule by democratic totalitarian systems, excessive choice, limitation of access to speech platforms, assimilation of minorities, belief in emotional morality, imagination and flexibility, and control by desire, debt and implicit threat of violence, no overt control of dissent, system selects for system-friendly voices, Huxleyan dystopia. That is yowza. And the right, as defined by the political spectrum that we are going off of here, is defined as most of the modern world, USA, Europe, Japan, etc. And then you have the far right. Rule by autocratic totalitarian people, elites, limitation of choice, repression of speech, and repression of minorities, belief in order, routine, and rational morality, and control by enclosure, fear, and explicit violence. Violent repression of dissent via the party line, Orwellian dystopia. Most of the pre-modern world and USSR, Nazi Germany, Saudi Arabia, etc., the bad guys. Interestingly, we, America, are actually expressing some of these totalitarian choices, such as student protests, peacefully occupying the lawn at college campuses, being brutally attacked and forcibly removed by law enforcement. That's violent repression of dissent. So the United States is very much so on the far right already. The fake country, that is where... I see. Okay, well, it seems like... I guess for a second it sounded like you were saying Palestine does not have the right to sovereignty, but it does seem like you're being sarcastic with your give the land back to Palestine. The fact of the matter is Palestine was a country before Israel existed. We know this. But what we don't know is that we thought this whole transition happened post-World War II for the relocation of Holocaust survivors. In fact, it was discussed in 1919 post-World War I. And at that time, it was discussed by Western powers, the Europeans and America, that Jewish people should find a homeland within Palestine and that there should be some sort of agreement on Palestinian land and sovereignty to allocate space for Israel. And that happened at around 1948 with Nakba, where then, well, the relocation happened, then Nakba happened, in which there was a civil war that Israel and Israel-backed won and started colonizing Palestine, committing acts of terror and genocide and suffering and war crimes over the course of the next 70 years. So, with that being said, that's the historical reference. Yeah. Here's the thing about Israel, too. Like, I don't have a problem with there being an Israeli homeland, a country, a nation state to call their own. But there's a difference between nations coming together in agreement to hand over a part of their land to establish the sovereign state of Israel, and Western powers demanding a weak Middle Eastern country must comply with this, and then allows that established nation to literally take it over in the most despicable way possible, as we are seeing today. And honestly, if Republicans are so keen on giving Israel a land, an actual state, then why not carve out some territory in the United States? Why not carve out a corner of Texas for Israel? There's plenty of room in Texas. I mean, you can drive from one end of Texas to the other end of Texas, and it still be Texas after 1,200 miles. Like, there's plenty of room for Israel, right? So if we're going to have these conversations and have them realistically, then let's put everything on the table. Why should Palestinians have to suffer? Why should the Middle East have to suffer from the aggression of Israel being backed by Western powers? Give them Florida. Well, and that's the thing. I'm giving that as an extreme example, right? If American conservatives are so keen on giving Israel Palestinian land, then they should be just as open and keen to giving Israel a homeland in the United States. It's the same thing. You're taking somebody else's sovereign territory and telling them that that's theirs now. And I wouldn't argue or disagree. I mean, but to the point, Zionism is in fact dramatically influencing our foreign policy, and it has been since the 1950s. 1951. And because of this, we have been constantly drug into Israel's conflicts. That's why the Middle East is our enemy, quote unquote, because of Israel, the Zionist state, not Jews. We are not conflating Israel with Judaism, but the state, the country, and the administrations that have led it are the problem. And they need to be held accountable collectively. That administration, those executive powers need to be held accountable at The Hague. But it'll never happen while the United States has the foreign policy position of Israel can do no wrong. Yeah, that was a long time ago, though, right? And Henry Ford was still not a paragon of virtue, but yeah, there were some few examples of American industrialists, and even JFK stood up to Israel at one point. Ronald Reagan himself stood up to Israel at one point. Didn't condemn them, but stood up to them. So there are brief moments in history where America says, like, hey, you need to chill. But Biden basically said, hey, guys, it's election year and you're killing me. Can you please stop doing the murder so blatantly? True. AZV, I am not arguing that Zionism is trying to conflate itself with Judaism, but it's the same way that Islamic extremism is being conflated with the religion of Islam, or that Islamic extremism is Islamic in any way. Terrorism is terrorism. The Spanish Inquisition was terrorism. The Crusades was terrorism, right? The Holocaust was Catholic terrorism, right? Because the Nazi state was a Catholic state, right? So we're not conflating ideology with religion. We're not going to do that here. Appreciate that, corn dog. I heard the Kauai. But yeah, Oh, and to this end, real estate. No one does expect the Spanish Inquisition, and no one expects falling into bankruptcy due to real estate either. People think you can just buy a house, flip it, and sell it, and it'll work out. That's not true. More people lose their livelihoods trying to buy and rent properties and make money off of that than people who just gamble. And to see commercials like this, or ads, I guess, 6-minute ads no less, is detrimental to the people, the victims who are going to watch this and believe that it is doable. So we're skipping this. I read something about how Zionism was a driver of anti-Semitism in the West to promote Jewish immigration to occupied Palestine. It wouldn't surprise me. And when, not that I mind talking about Palestine, I've actually been trying very hard not to talk about Palestine because I don't want this channel to just be the we need to talk about Palestine channel. There are other issues, but this one is obviously egregious. This is one of the worst human rights atrocities of our times. This is a modern day Holocaust. It needs to be talked about. To your point, though, Zionism has engaged in false flag activities. It has engaged in trying to stir up anti-Semitism and other stuff to justify its own existence. It has literally been blatantly talked about to justify that. And the same has happened throughout all of history, right? Clinton elevated Trump as a Pied Piper strategy and then ended up losing because it backfired, right? And so Zionism was always a nationalist, what's the word I'm looking for here? It always focused on one ideology, one thing, elevating themselves above others, conflating Judaism with the Holy Land and conflating that with the chosen people. And just like, again, the Aryan nation, the chosen people, right? America and Manifest Destiny, we're the chosen country. It is our God-given right to colonize the rest of the North American continent. This kind of colonialism and imperialism is not new to the world. It's just taking several generations for us to get it, understand that this is a bad thing. So, yeah, this is human rights violation, and Netanyahu needs to pay for what he has done to the multiple generations he has brutally offed, lest we forget the Shoah. Yeah, I agree. Netanyahu needs to 100% be brought before The Hague, and the United States needs to allow that to happen. The fact that Netanyahu has been invited to Congress, and the Republican Congress is saying that we just need to hear what he has to say, when he is saying it blatantly on the news every single day, that he wants to erase Palestine, that he is not going to stop until Hamas is destroyed. I mean, it was just like our war on terror. We could have found Osama bin Laden long before the 10 years. It took us 4 months to find Saddam Hussein hiding in a hole. You mean to tell me we couldn't have found Osama bin Laden living in a mansion? Really? It took us that long to find Osama bin Laden. But we found Saddam Hussein in 4 months, and then occupied Iraq and Afghanistan for the next 20 years. Like, that's not how that works. And this is Israel's global war on terror, Israel's Holocaust, whatever you want to call it, however you want to phrase it, however you want to conceptualize it. What is happening in Palestine is a human rights violation. It is an atrocity, and it is genocide. Whew. On a lighter topic, nope, we're still on this. Some guy on Twitch saying that if Trump gets elected, he will end the genocide. Do you give any credibility to this claim? Honestly, I believe, let's see, let's go to the React Hour page because I do want to get back to the economy.
If you've ever voted for my father, I'm asking.
We're not listening to that. Trump on Israel, June 2024. Son of a gun. I keep forgetting that my keyboard is tied. Trump on Israel, 2024. Sorry. Oh, 4 years ago. So I guess at one point he was on the side of Palestine, or at least outwardly. We're still not seeing much of anything there. I guess not. Oh, here we go. Let's find out.
But now the second half of this duo has officially started his own political comeback. Donald Trump announcing he will run for the Republican nomination for U.S. president in 2024.
This was a year ago, yeah.
With Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, already set to become Israel's prime minister.
The decline of America is being forced upon us by Biden and the radical left lunatics running our government right into the ground.
When Trump comes back, then the story of Trump and Israel comes back too. On one hand, the good feeling toward Trump on the part of many Israelis. On the other hand, the association of Israel with Trump, which could make the issue of U.S. support for Israel more polarizing and more partisan.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I have said, and this is true, that you have the key to the hearts of the people of Israel because of all the great things you've done.
Then there's the wider Middle East, where the Trump brand is linked with the brand of the Saudi ruling family, and especially with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Trump's decision to run means more spotlight on Saudi Arabia and MBS.
So I hope that answers your question. No, he is not going to do good things for the Middle East, certainly not for Palestinians, when even the Democratic leadership is not keen on holding Israel accountable. Trump is most certainly not going to do that. What would be interesting, though, and completely ironic, is if he did. If he actually turned right around and said, maybe we will stop doing things with Israel because they're hurting Palestine. He would do that if and only if it was politically expedient for him to do so. So to answer your question directly, I do not give any credibility to that claim. That is the direct answer to your question. Do I think that he would grift the situation in Palestine? Absolutely. Yeah, well, you know, there's a long-standing joke between my dad and I. He's not pro-Trump. He is more on the conservative side. We have some really good conversations. I think he is a closet left-leaning person, and he just doesn't want to admit it. But he always said that, what if Trump turns around and does all the good things that he says he's going to do and actually does make this country good? Will you get a red hat? I'm like, you know what? Let's say this was all a big ploy for the past 8 years, and his horrendous rhetoric, his despicable behavior, and his reprehensible just impact on national politics, domestic policy, and our foreign policy relations. Let's just say all of those 8 years was a big lead up to pulling the mask off, and then he was just this wonderful person descended from the gods themselves. Sure, I'd buy a red hat. That ain't gonna happen, though. The man has a history of what he does. He has a history of racism. He has a history of discrimination. He has a history of abuse, an abuse of power. We saw nepotism run rampant in his administration, and he basically bought and sold the cabinet chair positions to whomever wanted them. So no, that's not going to happen. And that's true. The felonies, he might be in prison, for crying out loud. And Oshun, apparently, thank you for bringing that up. His stance on Israel is stronger than the Biden administration, and that man just basically gave Israel a green light to commit genocide because he condemned Israel and then said, you need to stop, and then Israel said, we're not, and then Biden said, nothing. Let's see, the thing is, he has an ego. Maybe if he had a red line like Rafah, and the Israel spit in his face and invade Rafah, he would actually cut aid to them because of his ego, unlike Biden. But that's just wishful thinking. Well, it's not wishful thinking. That's true. If his ego were on the line, it absolutely would cause that scenario to play out. But he's so in bed with Israel, Netanyahu, and AIPAC that's just not going to happen. Like, I would love to have that hypothetical discourse, right? Like, for instance, we could have a debate on, would secession as president raise taxes on wealthy people, or would he allow the tax rate to stay? See, we could have that debate, because if I was presented with the good enough reason to not raise taxes on the wealthy, I wouldn't. Of course, the empirical data is there. We need to tax billionaires out of existence. We need to, at the very least, eliminate any sort of income wage or income tax caps on our federal programs, right? If we didn't have a cap on Social Security and Medicare taxes, it would be solvent forever, and there would be no way to make it not solvent, right? And if we held the rich accountable for all of their tax loopholes, rewrote the entire tax code to simply say this, you can only write off that number that we came up with and children, nothing else. There you go. No more offshore bank accounts. No more buying a yacht and writing that off, and then teachers not able to write off school supplies. Right? And if we have universal education and universal health care, teachers would not have to pay for their school supplies in the first place, right? It's just, when you start getting into these whataboutisms or what-ifisms, you're giving the person, the subject, entirely too much credit if they have decades of history of not doing those things. In fact, most of the resolutions and laws that Biden campaigned against in his latest election were things that he put into place as a senator 30, 40 years ago. That's the crazy part. Oh, Biden's left and populist. Since when? When he was literally on his hands and knees licking the boots of Reagan? Working with Reagan hand in hand, screwing over black people? Like, at what point was he populist? Please, show me on paper when Biden was a populist. Trump has been horrible since the 70s. My mom lived in Queens, and she said the Trumps were famous for being racist slumlords. Trump also moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which was a slap in the face. Yeah, you're correct. He did do that, and it was an international incident at the time. Still to this day. So, again, we can keep talking about this. It's your stream. I'm just here for the ride. Or we can analyze the tech bubble on today's economic discussion. Going once, twice, three. All right.
A leadership shakeup coming to Alphabet, the tech giant announcing that former Eli Lilly CFO Anand Ashkenazi will take over the role as chief financial officer. Alphabet has announced that its current CFO, Ruth Porat, will start her new role as president and chief investment officer next month. For more on what this could signal for the company moving forward, we have Justin Post. He is Bank of America's Securities Senior Internet Technology Analyst.
This is
He's
not
joining
what
us
I thought
live
it was
from Bank
about.
of America.
Well, for Google. So the stock's up a little bit this morning. I've been through maybe 3 of these transitions in my
looking at
all this build-up for this video, and it's talking about Google's stocks. I thought we were talking about AI.
Versus just
okay. AI economic bubble. There we go. My bad. Yes, free Palestine. In fact, is that not in my title? I know Palestine is in my tags. So, oh, that's so bright. Are we in a bubble? TLDR news. Are we in an AI bubble? That seems that presumably
Look, I'll cut the malarkey.
will be
We're
about the
facing
subject.
Brought to you by Brilliant. Last week, NVIDIA released its earnings report for the first quarter of 2024.
Watermelons.
Once again, America's third largest company massively outperformed expectations, with quarterly revenue soaring by 262% year on year, driven by massive demand for both its current generation Hopper GPUs and its new Blackwell chips. Unsurprisingly, these results sent NVIDIA's stock soaring, and as of Thursday, shares are now trading about 20% higher than they were pre-earnings. All in all, this means NVIDIA's stock has doubled since the beginning of this year and multiplied tenfold since October 2022.
Kind of crazy.
Now, while NVIDIA's number...
When you see stocks go up in value at the same rate as like cryptocurrencies. I don't... So like, I do put in the emojis and all that, but maybe I just struggle with finding watermelon emojis or something. Because I type it out first in Word and then copy and paste it. So I don't know. I'll start making sure that there's some watermelon emojis so that people are in the know that we support Palestine here.
Are clearly great. The dizzying rate at which its stock has climbed, accompanied by similar claims among other AI-adjacent tech companies, has sparked fear that the AI boom that's pushed the S&P 500 to unprecedented highs might in fact be a bit of a bubble. So in this video, we're going to have a look at why some people think the AI boom is really a bubble, why other people disagree, and why both sides could be sort of right at the same time. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell. This is not investment advice. And more generally, don't take investment advice from YouTubers. So, caveats aside, let's dive in.
Don't take advice from YouTubers, but take advice from streamers and ladies on their ads, on the ads, right? Take your financial advice from people on Reels.
Is the AI boom actually a bubble? Well, the honest answer is that no one knows. So we're going to present both sides of the argument, and you can make your mind up for yourself. Broadly speaking, there are two types of arguments on either side.
Ooh,
there's a technological argument over whether or not AI is actually the revolutionary technology that its advocates claim it to be.
Guevara. What Oshun just said, watermelons and orcas, messenger that to me so I don't forget.
And there's a more financial argument about whether or not the stock market is looking bubbly at the moment. So let's start by looking at the arguments against AI being a bubble. The main arguments made on this side is a technological one, that generative AI is a genuinely unprecedented technology that merits the enormous investments and valuations that we've seen over the past couple of years. ChatGPT, for instance, was the fastest spreading tech platform in history, with an estimated 100 million monthly users only 2 months after launch.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, just like with the dot-com bubble, it eventually became a bubble, right? But it was over the course of 10 or 20 years. So we are seeing the modern day dot-com bubble in the form of AI companies and the tech boom, right? And for the most part, we probably missed out on, this one or the other. We clearly missed out on NVIDIA. And I have NVIDIA. Trust me, I could sit here and plug NVIDIA all day long, right? But I didn't buy their stock because I didn't have $120 or $115 lying around, right? Most people don't. So these booms are still out of reach of regular people in terms of being able to financially benefit. The technology, however, that's true. Many people said the internet would just be a fad, and look at us now. We are literally streaming from the internet. But the value of a website, of a URL, is relevant or irrelevant now, right? At most URLs are $20 at most. Places like, of course, Facebook are going to have more, or single-digit, triple-digit letterings. They're going to be worth a little bit more, but they're not worth millions of dollars like they were in the late 90s, early thousands. The same thing with AI. We are in an AI bubble. I am going to say that unequivocally. We are going to watch the rest of this video. We'll discuss it. But I'm telling you unequivocally we are in a bubble. It's just we're in the beginning stages of that bubble. Just like we're in a cryptocurrency bubble. We're in the middle of that bubble. Bubbles take around 20 years to pop, right? But the stock market bubble pops every 5 to 10 years. And then lots of people suffer because of it. And the other problem is that we are kind of due for one. 2013 was the last recession. And we don't have... So, that's the other problem, right? When I said that conflating the stock market with the economy is the problem, is because if we buy into that and then the stocks go down, but then we lose our homes and we lose our jobs, we just say, oh, dang, it's because of the economy, when no, it's the stocks. Companies are trying to save their bottom line. That's what it is, which is why the layoffs, the quits, and the stock buybacks are not positive indicators of a healthy economy. It is literally poaching the value of resources and the stocks and reallocating it higher to the wealthy, the money class, the owner class. So this is the bubble that we're in. Now, would I personally recommend buying into AI companies? No. Never, ever, 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 ever spend your money if you cannot afford to lose it. If you can accept risk, and if you have the resources to spare, then I would consider getting into the AI space, cryptocurrency space, what have you. Because there is enough justification for the technology and its use case that it is not going away anytime soon. That does not mean go buy NFTs. That does not mean go give your social security number to the latest meme coin. That means do some due diligence, do some research, and make sure that if you are going to spend money, prepare to lose all of it. And I can tell you, I have lost quite a bit of money with cryptocurrency, with stocks, because I was not smart with it. I did not do my due diligence. And I tried to day trade because I thought I was smart. Not smarter than the market, quote unquote. So, to recap, we are in a boom. There is no question about that. We are in a boom, a bubble, if you will. But it is the beginning stages of that bubble. I do not see the AI bubble popping anytime soon, nor do I see the technology going away ever. I believe this is now here to stay. Hopefully it improves. Hopefully it starts getting regulated, which, again, on www.samronan.com/more-issues/AI regulation, you will find my actual policy on AI regulation. Thank you for commenting again, because I did miss your last comment. I apologize. AI is the next industrial revolution. I tried day trading as well and lost $200, still losing. Yeah, exactly, right? If you can't afford it, don't play with it. But you're right. With the AI is the next industrial revolution. I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And who knows, 10, 20 years down the road, there might be some merger of AI and cryptocurrency, maybe even the meta space. I mean, let's pull back, the wool a little bit. Let's let our hair down a little bit. Let's get a little fuzzy, let's loosen the tie a little, roll up our sleeve a second, maybe unbutton this guy. And let's just relax for a second. I am a big nerd, hence why I'm on Twitch. Normally, I would try integrating gaming into the stream, but we're just having a hoot-hollering good time. Part of my nerdiness is being an avid enjoyer of anime. My favorite genre of anime is isekai and the VR MMO anime. Why VR MMO specifically? Because the future technology of being able to immerse yourself in a world and exist in that world as if you are in this space, being able to interact in that space and actually impact your real world is so fascinating. Imagine if you really could make money and make a living by playing video games inside an actual video game. And this isn't obviously a new concept. There has been novels and comics and all this for decades discussing this very core concept. But AI, so not this kind of AI, but true artificial intelligence that can make decisions, that can reason, that can ration, that can teach itself, like the software that you see a lot where the AI teaches itself how to run. That kind of AI is coming. The integration of this kind of iterative AI is going to improve. And then the digital spaces in which these things can thrive will become more robust, and they will become more interactive, and they will become accepted. Blockchain technology and cryptocurrency as a concept will be integral in that. So our future is changing, and it will integrate blockchain, it will integrate AI, and it will integrate digital spaces as part of our real world experiences. So, the tie back up where it belongs. We'll get back to adulting.
And AI's most bullish advocates argue that its ability to perform language-based cognitive tasks could transform our economy. Goldman Sachs, for instance, expects AI to essentially double the rate of US productivity growth, while McKinsey reckons that AI and associated automation technologies could increase global GDP growth by an upper limit of 3.4% over the coming decade, more than doubling the global GDP growth rate. The most bullish AI advocates, like these guys, expect AI to increase global GDP growth by more than 5%, which, assuming a baseline of about 3%, would imply a doubling of global GDP in the next 10 years.
So that's, fundamentally what I just got done saying. And of course, we're in the bullish section, and I gave a very bullish outlook, right? The boom, if you will, right? But think about it. ChatGPT has been fed by Reddit, and so sometimes you're getting some really off-the-wall answers, and especially with Google, right? You type in something, and the response is AI-generated, right? I personally make sure I get a link. So I typed in the true political spectrum, and it doesn't even give me an AI response, right? But how to do CPR, and it'll be like you need to punch them in the face or something, right? We've seen it on the internet, right? So obviously AI has a lot of work to do, but lots of people use AI as a tool, right? Help you write your resume, help you craft an email message. In fact, I encourage everyone to at least have a ChatGPT free user account for things like that. I'm not saying rely on it blindly, I'm saying use the tool as the resource that it is, right? When it comes to iterative generation like graphics or music or video, obviously, there's an ethical quandary involved because it is not currently regulated. There is no legislation governing the use of learning materials, right? The materials that the AI was given to learn how to do X, Y, and Z. And of course, the compensation of the artists and the writers and the IP holders that were impacted. And these are things that we need to address. Once those things are addressed, it's open season, right? Imagine if you can, how many people actually want to write a novel, write a book, write a comic book, draw pictures, but don't have the talent, right? AI could help you bring your vision to life, but only after the AI companies, owners thereof, actually compensate the artists and the writers that they stole their information from. Until we have that kind of compensation, then and that kind of regulation, then AI is unethical in that sense. But it is still a tool, and that is why it is growing. And the more we adapt to it, the more we use these tools, just like the internet, just like email, just like being able to automate. Automation is innovation. And the more we can automate, the more we can innovate, the more we can innovate, the more we can prosper and grow as a society, as a species. And that is, whether you like it or not, whether it's ethical or not, that is the reality of AI. Let's see. My only experience with stocks is my 401k, and I get so angry anytime I lose any money. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Instead of pensions, we have, hey, let's gamble with your retirement. Trust us. And a 401k, Ashone, you can absolutely answer this question if you'd like. I don't want to speak on your behalf. But a 401k is a retirement investment vehicle in the United States, which has tax benefits. If you put after-tax money into the 401k and let it mature when you are of retirement age at 59 and a half or 65 or whatever it is, when you pull out money, you don't incur any penalties or taxes. I bought NVIDIA when it was $222 because my son told me I should. Well, damn, you made $800. Or no, $1,000, right? Because it $1,100? Oh, so you made almost $1,000. Maybe it's time to sell. I mean, part of investing is taking profit at some point.
If these numbers are even close to the mark, then the extravagant valuations we've seen recently are easily justified. The second argument is that we haven't seen a proliferation of so-called bullshit companies that you usually see during bubbles.
So it is not similar to a pension, because a pension is paid out to or by a company for the remaining life of the employee who earned that pension. A 401k is a separate investment vehicle that is usually managed by a bank or other institution or yourself. Yeah, Drea, 1,006. I would sell that sucker right away. That's over $700 right
In the
there.
.com bubble, for instance, there were a whole load of companies that were basically just domain names rushing into IPOs and achieving eye-watering valuations. Similarly, in the crypto bubble a couple of years ago, there were a whole load of clearly bullshit meme coins that had no real value apart from their ridiculous names. Rather, most of the AI-related gains have been captured by the so-called Magnificent Seven, so Tesla, Meta, Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, Nvidia, and Microsoft, none of which could really be described as bullshit companies. The third argument is that even though the Magnificent Seven have seen steep rises in the market cap recently, they're not drastically overvalued. This is in part because some of their recent growth is in a sense a recovery from the tech drawdown we saw in late 2022, and their price-to-earnings ratios haven't changed drastically in the last couple of years. A useful comparison can be made between Nvidia today and Cisco during the .com bubble. During the 90s, Cisco...
Hey, guys, was I right or was I right? This is what I'm talking about, right? See, why is this guy, SaSeshen, sitting with his suit and his tie and his vest and his little flag pin that says SaSeshen on it, which you probably can't see, in the Oval Office? Why is he sitting here on Twitch, of all places, right? Shouldn't he be, like, I don't know, making YouTube videos instead or something? It's because I want to educate, and I want to create a community, haha, like everybody else, but of activists, of people who know what civic engagement is, and a combination, everything in between thereof, so that we can start taking back the lack of democracy and the lack of control that we have over our lives. And so when I talk about these issues, right, and we have reporters, or, you know, close enough, talking about these issues from a neutral standpoint, giving facts, giving information, drawing historical references, and I have already done so leading up to the conversation, I want you to understand that, like, I'm not just some guy who's pretending to look smart like Ben Shapiro. I am some guy who has taken the time, the energy, the blood, sweat, and tears to learn this stuff and to make intelligent opinions and draw intelligent conclusions from them, and hopefully come up with viable solutions to these problems that will actually benefit people based on historical evidence or factual, numerical, statistical evidence that would justify it. So I just don't want you guys to think that I'm some guy pretending. Like, I've been on the CNN debate stage. I have ran for office. I have held my own in the highest levels of our nation's political spheres. I've just been poor the entire time, which is probably why you've never heard of me. So part of what we're doing here is developing that growth and that trust and that awareness. And yes, we're going to start teaching each other about how to engage in civics, how to protect yourself from, you know, the grifters and the pariahs and the parasites of our society trying to sell you snake oil. So anywho. Thank you. I appreciate that, Ocean.
Cisco was most focused on building routers and other internet hardware, in much the same way that Nvidia today is more about building the infrastructure behind the tech rather than the tech itself. But at the peak of the .com bubble, Cisco's 2-year forward price-to-earnings ratio, that is, the ratio between its current market cap versus its forecast earnings in 2 years' time, was over 100. Nvidia's 2-year PE ratio, however, is only 27, high by normal standards, but not absurd.
Stupid ants.
So. Alright, so those are the arguments against AI being a bubble. Let's take a look at the other side. The first argument is a technological one, that AI isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Which
Proponents
it
of this
isn't.
argument might point to AI's apparent plateau, the lack of obvious use cases, or liken AI to previous innovations that just haven't come through. But the second and perhaps more popular argument is that even if in the aggregate the Magnificent Seven's PE ratio hasn't changed all that much, it's still gone up a bit, and certain companies have seen bubble-esque increases. For instance, the combined market value of Alphabet, Amazon, and Microsoft has jumped by $3 trillion during the AI boom, 150
Jesus.
times the $20 billion in revenue they expect to come from generative AI.
So let's talk about that for a second. 3 companies have the 5th highest GDP in the world. I believe the top GDP in the world. I'm probably have to type in top 5. Top 5. US, China, Germany, Japan, and India. I'm not entirely certain if it's in that order. There we go. 6 more rows. Come on. Oh, I take it back. Or I was wrong. They are in the top 10. So 3 companies combined have a combined valuation that would put them at the 8th place in global GDP, meaning they would have a higher GDP than Brazil, Italy, and Canada, who are also on the top 10. They would be very close to France and the UK, who are at 3.1 and 3.5 trillion respectively, and India, who is at 3.9 trillion. 3 companies are within spitting distance of the top 5 countries by GDP. That's obscene. And how many of those companies are profit sharing with their employees? How many employees do they have combined, right? We could sit here and go through that. But my point is, if they have a valuation of $3 trillion and they've made $25.6 billion a piece, and they have, I know Amazon has at least 1.1 million employees. Say it's a grand total of 2 million employees and 75 billion in revenue, or profit, mind you. So 75 billion divided by 2.2 million. Oh, I accidentally did times. And divided is $34,000 in what could have been distributed to the workforce. Obviously, with my policies, it would actually be only half. So $17,000 in average profit sharing. That's how much profit the average employee made at the top 3 companies in our country alone. Those countries who have a combined valuation that is in the top 10 of GDPs globally. Like, when you start crunching these numbers and making these comparisons, it's just obscene how wealthy these companies are and how greedy and just, I don't even know. Parasitic is the only word that comes to mind right now. They are, and abusive they are to the American people. Let's see. I've asked my representative to... Ooh, I missed it. I'm sorry. I was on a tangent, guys. I'm a terrible streamer. I'm so sorry. Let's see. There we go. I've asked my representatives to only invest in companies and industries that are not problematic. Okay. So he gets very frustrated with me because those are the most lucrative industries. That's a choice, and it's true. I mean, you should. And to that end, the divestment, right, the boycott in America against Starbucks and all those other problematic companies has been very functional. It has been very successful over the past 8 months now. All of the companies you just mentioned have lost billions in dollars in revenue and continue to lose billions of dollars in revenue. So keep it up. And yeah, AZV, that's basically, yeah. All right. I'm going to let you two just go ahead and chat. You guys got this.
Bubbly. Its current PE ratio is nearly 70, more than double the other Magnificent Seven stocks. And while it justifies this with reference to future sales, this all assumes that Nvidia continues to dominate the chips market for the next couple of years, and that demand for chips holds up, which is possible but not inevitable. The final argument is that even if we haven't seen that many bullshit companies, AI is clearly a bit of a corporate fad at the moment, as evidenced by the exponential rise in earnings call mentioning AI.
That's true. Everybody and their mother now is trying to integrate an AI in some form or fashion, right? You can't go to a car dealership now without having an AI chatbot, right? So AI is a fad, just like the internet.com bubble was a fad for a time and Bitcoin was a fad for a time until it wasn't. So right now we're in the fun, shiny stages, which is why it is a bubble and it will eventually burst, but we're in the beginning stages, right? The bubble takes a certain amount of time for it to skyrocket. And Dre Romy, yeah, we honestly, what would be an interesting investment vehicle is if a financial institution or a collective of regular people were able to pull our money and resources together and create our own, what do you call that? It's not an ETF, I don't think. I forget now what the money vehicle is called, but so in the 401k, you usually put your money in a pot, right? The 2023, or the 2030, the 2040, the 2050 pot. I forget what that term is at the moment, but you put those in a pot, right? And then you can dictate, I want to be in this industry or this category or that category, or just put it in the S&P 500 and leave it alone. Imagine if we could create our own fund and it be non-problematic companies. I think that would be a very novel approach to finance and investment.
And while the Magnificent Seven have captured most of the AI boom, AI startups are increasingly popular with venture capital, despite an otherwise difficult investment climate. Ultimately, no one knows, and we'll just have to wait to see if or when the bubble pops. But perhaps it's possible that both sides are sort of right. Some bubbles, like the NFT bubble a couple of years ago, or the original tulip bubble in the 1630s, are wholly speculative. There's no justifying the price, and people are only buying because they think they'll be able to sell on to someone else at a higher price.
Thank you,
But
Drea.
some bubbles are based on a genuinely revolutionary technology. It's just that market enthusiasm outruns the industry. The fiber optic bubble in the 80s and the dot-com bubble in the 90s, for instance, were predicated on the revolutionary potential of the internet, which turned out to be correct. It's just that everyone got a bit too excited a bit too early. It's possible that AI will end up being the same sort of thing, a revolutionary technology that just takes a bit longer to blossom than its advocates suggest. When making videos like this, we rely on tons of data analysis to interpret crucial economic data and understand political decisions. But this kind of analysis isn't just crucial for our jobs. As our world becomes more driven by AI and data, your job will likely require more analytical skills too. That's why
Which is what we brought up earlier in the stream, is that, and I don't mean this in any way derogatory, right? That I am not saying this in any way that's negative. We as a country are losing our critical thinking skills, our ability to analyze. And it's because we have been led by the nose our entire lives, from school through to the workforce, to be obedient and complacent, to not question authority, to not question what we are told, to not question facts, that far-right authoritarianism nonsense, right? That has been our way of life for decades. I am 34 years old, and it took me until 2013, when I was still active duty in that government shutdown by Ted Cruz, who basically said, we don't want to improve healthcare, and then shut down the military, or the government, for me to understand, like, oh, wow, my service has been rendered useless by this clown in Washington. Maybe I should get into politics, and maybe I should learn about it, right? I am you, you are me. We are all the same. We have all had our aha moment in different ways during different times for different reasons. So when it comes to critical thinking and analysis and trying to fight back against the system, we do turn to the people like this, perhaps like me and like Hassan, who discuss these issues and provide our opinions and our insights to kind of help you understand whatever circumstances are going on at the time. But it is a disservice if the only thing we are doing is giving our information to you and you not questioning it or analyzing it any further than what we say, and if we discourage you from doing so, right? There aren't many on the left and none on the right that do teach you, that do help you engage, that do provide resources. A lot of it is gatekept even on the left, right? Yeah, go right. We all need to protest. We need to tell Biden what we really think. But who has actually ever told you how? This is how. This is where to go. This is what you need to say. This is how you need to say it. I am trying to be different. In fact, if you go to my channel, the About Me page, I believe it is, or the home page, About Me page, whichever page allows you to see my panels, the two on the bottom, which I named them, I put them in freaking developer, and I still forget what the hell they're called. So it's the About Me page, and it is Contact Your Rep and the Script for Your Rep. I am going to improve both of those panels substantially by creating Coursera courses, and they will, in fact, be free. And the reason why I'm going to make Coursera courses and why they are going to be free is because this is information that should not be gatekept. Like, if I were to make a Coursera course on how to invest in Bitcoin, that should be monetized, right? Because if you're not even going to be serious about financial investment and take the risk in a course, you have no business taking risk in the financial market, right? Or if I'm trying to teach you how to, I don't know, set up a Twitch stream, whatever. I don't know why you would take my word for it. You know, I'm not Hassan or Asmongold, right? I'm not a big streamer, but I know how to set it up. I made this. This looks pretty cool, and maybe beginners would find that useful. Maybe charge a little bit of money for that. Maybe don't gatekeep it, right? But for things like civic engagement and for helping people take back ownership of their lives, I don't believe that should be gatekept at all. So we have some chat going on. I missed it again. God. Let's see. You wrote, where did you serve, if you don't mind me asking? And Reginald said the right provide plenty of resources. Okay, I stand corrected. When you say that the right provides plenty of resources, do you mean that they provide resources for civic engagement or resources to reiterate their talking points? Because there is the Project 2025, for instance, right? That is technically a blueprint and an outline for policy agenda, but that doesn't tell anybody how to get involved other than give us money. Now, you asked, where did I serve? I served in Kadena, Japan, which is in Okinawa. Or I served on Kadena Air Base, which is in Okinawa, Japan, and I served in Little Rock Air Force Base in Arkansas. I was a PMEL, which is a fancy word for metrologist, which is a fancy word for I was the guy who worked on torque wrenches and scales and fancy equipment that measured values or output values. So our running joke was, it's an inch because I say it is, right? It's a pound because I say it is. We made sure that an inch was an inch within specific tolerances. I was also in the reserves in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, where I was a personnelist, where I learned I am terrible at customer service. I was actually the guy at the front desk that you spoke to as you were coming in, waiting to get either your personnel records, your career documents, updating your address, updating your next of kin, or getting an ID card. And I made people mad. I made people cry because I was just myself. So I had a colonel come in. Actually, I think it was a general, but it might have been a colonel. Came in. He's like, I need my ID card. And I'm like, that's fantastic. There's the line. He's like, I don't think you heard me, son. And I'm like, no, I did. You said you needed an ID card. There is a line that has been there for 2 hours. Do you have your documentation? Do you have your previous ID? Do you have the requirements that are necessary for your ID? He's like, well, no, I'm a group commander. I need to get my ID right now, or else blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, sir, you can get your documentation. You can get the required stuff that you need, and then you can wait in line. And my supervisor pulled me aside. Sergeant Ronan, Sergeant, come here. You can't say that to a colonel. And then I ended up in the programs management office, which was a closet. Let's see. The right helps conservatives that align with their views get elected. And Reginald, the right advocate for self-improvement and participation in community and adhering to virtues. Interesting take. So when you talk about interacting with community and adhering to virtues, are you talking about evangelical Christianity? Are you talking about spreading the word of God? So that would also be what the Mormons do, correct? They go door to door and they spread the gospel, and they pray for you, right? And that's Christians, that's Baptists, that's right, that kind of thing. I pray for you. It's like, oh, that's against my religion and belief, right? Right, so it's religion. So I will concede that fact. Yes, conservatism does rely heavily on religious doctrine and empowerment through religious doctrine. I will agree with that. I will say it has no business being in politics. I think if you are going to use your religion as a basis for morality, ethics, or in decision-making whatsoever regarding legislation or political decision-making, that should intrinsically bar you from office. And if you're already in office, that should be grounds to remove you. Why? The separation of church and state. I can have strong religious values and be Buddhist, or be Satanist, or be Muslim, or be Jewish, or be Wiccan, or be, what's another big one? Confucianist. I could be pagan. I could be Nordic pagan. I could be Roman pagan. I could be Greco-Roman pagan, right? I could be Egyptian pagan, right? I could be venerating Ra, the sun god. By the way, Amen stems from Amen-Ra. That's how the Egyptians would end their praises to Amen-Ra, by saying Amen. And Amen is a derivative of that, just like Easter is a derivative of the goddess Ishtar, the fertility goddess in Mesopotamia, I believe, India, that region, who was worshipped during what we call Easter. And same thing with Christmas. Has nothing to do with Christ. It's Saturnalia. It's Festivus, which is a Roman holiday. So religious doctrine and religious beliefs and values have their place for individuals. And if you want to build community within that religion, by all means do so. But keep it out of politics. Let's see. We have a separation of church and state. Yep, we touched on that. The benefits of this religious slant also benefit those politically such as virtues. Again, if you need the threat of hell or a doctrine written by man to dictate to you what is good and what is bad, then as long as somebody who represents that religion tells you what is good and what is bad, you'll believe it, which is fundamentally what the problem is with Zionism. Zionism is an extremist sect that believes they are God's chosen people. And so their beliefs have influenced not just their country's politics, but our country's, international country's politics for decades, over a century to a degree. Zionism has been around since the 1990s. Yes, all of those religions have their own potential benefits, and all of them outweigh the spiritual nihilism of the left. I have not once said anything about spiritual nihilism. I said that spirituality and religion have no basis in politics. Morality and ethics do, and morality and ethics do not need to be and should not be tied to any sort of doctrine. It should be evident through the acts themselves. If we pass this economic law, is it going to cause widespread poverty and disparity? Yes, then it is immoral and unethical. If we pass this law to ban abortion, will it take away women's body autonomy? Yes, it will. That's discrimination. That is immoral and unethical. It's things like that. Let's see. A lot of socialists are Catholics, including myself, Oshun. Sure, but those are the minority. No, that's not factually true at all. Also, the left is deeply tied to its own decentralized populist religious movement, what we call woke. So we do have a conservative on the channel. Fantastic. Woke. How would you define woke? Or what constitutes woke? Because again, anti-discrimination is what is often alluded to as woke. And that's true too. Oshun, you make a very valid point. Fundamentalist Christianity and baptism in America is very conservative. It is very regressive as well. But they claim to be followers of Jesus Christ, whom the New Testament is written about and for. And during the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus Christ did not discriminate. In fact, with things like adultery and lust, specifically lust, I forget what the chapter and verse is, but it was like, Jesus, if her clothing causes my eyes to sin, what should I do? Pluck out your eyes. What if her clothing causes my hands to sin? Cut off your hands. What if her clothing causes my manhood to sin? Then cut off your manhood. Jesus Christ literally preached control, self-control. And yet we have a lot of anti-female discrimination. She was asking for it. She shouldn't have been wearing that. She wanted it. Well, she shouldn't have been drinking, right? That's just the simplest, that's the easiest example. Another example would be the sharing of the fish and the bread. That wasn't that the bread and the fish miraculously became enough to feed everybody, but that they took it upon themselves to feed those who were in most need. So, and again, Jesus Christ said the camel would have a better chance of walking through the eye of a needle than the rich getting into heaven. So, like, religious doctrine, if it were even followed, still wouldn't have any place in government, because morals and ethics should not be tied to any sort of religious text. Okay, so woke, in your opinion, is just identity politics. So, but woke is the term for the movement. Okay. There is a populist left-wing movement. They also espouse a variety of identical ideals. We commonly just call that woke now. The word doesn't matter, though, if you want to argue against the word. I'm not arguing against the word. I'm just trying to understand the context of this conversation that we're having. So, a variety of identical ideals. To what? Or did you mean identity ideals? That could have been a genuine typo. I just want to understand that we're having the conversation on the same page here. Because you might be late to the conversation, but we actually went over the actual panel, the actual graph of the political spectrum as defined internationally. So let's get to that. So what you would call the far left, I imagine, is actually this: rule by intellectuals and professionals overseeing democratic welfare state, heavy restrictions on wealth acquisition, privatization, etc., heavily unionized workplaces, heavily subsidized public services, small or non-existent military. Would I be correct in assuming you would consider that the far left? Or would you consider this the far left? Rule by workers' councils, direct democracy, or middle-class intellectuals. Like every other position in the Overton window, fundamentally civilized, technophilic, literalist, relativistic, domesticated. Would that be more what you would consider the far left? The latter. Okay. So, that is, in fact, a minority in this country. Of the leftist movement, that what I just said, the workers' councils and direct democracy or middle-class intellectuals, that is a minority. And to a greater or lesser degree, those ideals have historically failed. Now, it gives the Bolshevik movement, the Spanish Civil War, and Makhnevist Ukraine. And the failures there were the autocratic and authoritarian elements that undertoned those, right? The idea that we could self-regulate is not far left. We see it happen all the time, right? When a natural disaster occurs, we self-regulate by banding together as a community, consolidating our resources and distributing it to the needy as needed, because that's what we do. We are a communal species, so we will tend towards autonomous leadership when time comes. But in society and government, we want more structure, and we need infrastructure. We need more involved institutions and parties to facilitate these things, right? And that's why decentralized organizations have never succeeded. That's why decentralized movements have never succeeded. And it's why the Green Party as a national party continues to suffer. because they are a national organization that does not support their state organizations, which in turn does not support their county organizations or city or campus organizations. So you're right. The left wing does struggle ideologically because it intrinsically hampers itself. Now, in terms of wokeism and identity politics, we have to have this conversation. By highlighting an African American transgender woman breaking a glass ceiling, we're highlighting the fact that historically in our country, it has been so unspeakable and so unfathomable that a black African American transgender woman could hold a position of power, that it is worth noting. That it was the first time in history that it happened in June 2024, for example. Right? And now you're coming up with contradictions and pitfalls of human conditions such as greed, BLM leaders buying themselves mansions with donations. You're right. But that's not wokeism. That is capitalism. That is literally unethical, unregulated capitalism. And it's no different than the grifting that the Donald Trump campaign did by literally not giving the donations received during fundraisers for Yellow Star veterans. It's no different than evangelicals who are multimillionaires having multi-mansions and Ferraris and all that and taking their parishioners' money to literally enrich themselves. So I'm going to have to disagree with that point. No, I'm saying your example of BLM buying themselves mansions with donations is capitalism. That is 100% capitalism. There was nothing... The economic and governmental system that we have, which relies heavily on capitalism, does not prevent nonprofit institutions from buying capital assets. It just means they don't have to pay taxes on those capital assets. And true, that is greed. But as we have said, that is not simply a reflection of the left. So if that is one of your basis arguments, that there are bad actors on the left and therefore wokeism is a problem, that is not a correlation. It doesn't need to prevent them from buying it. Those people made the choice themselves. It is indeed a reflection of the left. Then we can if you're going to say that BLM being bad actors or those leaders being bad actors in BLM is a reflection of the left, then the bad acting of conservatives is also a reflection of the right. And to a greater or lesser degree, the right is significantly more homogenous in their values and beliefs anyway. They do believe in that structure. They do believe in that discussion in that community, and they rely on it. They will vote red no matter what. They will support conservatives no matter what. And that kind of indoctrination is still a problem. Right? And there are extreme examples there too. The KKK, for instance, the fact that Nazis are running in the Republican primary for governor and Senate in various primaries across the country. Guess we had a quick blip on our stream here, but we're still
don't know what you're supposed to do.
We're still going strong.
Somehow it all just comes together. And then you don't know why you
That's a relief.
One of the things putting a bid into the bond market is the U.S. April job openings data that just dropped. We learned that in April, U.S. job openings
any bad example that you find on left, we can find on the right. And again, this isn't about bashing the right. This is just saying that if that's your argument, then you are being very disingenuous. And you're disregarding the very real truth of the bad acting on the right. I guess my speakers here turned off. What's with these connectivity issues? I'm not enjoying this at all.
One of the things putting a
It's not giving me the warm fuzzies. This could be interesting.
After nearly...
So, is it down? Is it back? Darn it. It looks like it's still live. So we're good. Okay, good. We're still going strong here. So, Reginald, I think the main argument that I'm having, or the main point that I'm trying to make with your comparison here, is that it seems one-sided, fundamentally. You're only focusing on the negative elements of the left and not holding the right equally accountable. So, yeah, and I do have my chat extremely moderated, just in case there are some bad actors that are trying to get me a strike, you know, a moderation strike or whatever, by typing like the N-word or something stupid like that. So we're not gonna. I'm just not playing those games. I'm not taking any risks because this is a political channel and things can get pretty heated at times. I'm just assuming that somewhere down the road that's going to happen, and I just don't want to deal with that. Oh boy. So it does look like we're offline.